Let's look at how domestic violence impacts the child in every respect. And looking at this with us right here in the studio is Reverend Juliet Benite, who is a certified mediator, trainer, and facilitator of leadership concepts. Good to have you in the studio, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning. My pleasure to be here.
And seeing you today, I just feel like it's going to be more of a session for parents on how to do parenting. Let's begin from there.
Yeah.
Parenting the child, the misconceptions that could come up, parents trying to ensure that going by the biblical injunction, do not spare the road and spoil the child. Now, at what point does it lead to even violating the child or abusing the child?
Well, you know, child abuse has to do with the maltreatment of the child, whether it's physically, emotionally, or sexually, and educationally. Sometimes we forget the aspect of the education of the child is actually child abuse. When the child is denied education, it is child abuse. With Nigeria has 20 million children out of school. 20 million is a population of nations in Europe. Our children are out of school in the street begging. Is fundamentally child abuse, and it's also the failure of parenting. The greatest offense that has happened in our time, and even as Africans most especially, is that even when a young girl or man is getting married, we talk and emphasize so much on the marriage between these two and forget the concept of parenting, which is the very reason, one of the major reasons for coming together. And parenting is where you form a child's capacity to the level of his own gifting or her giftings, as the case may be. And so in raising up children, parents need to know what discipline is. Discipline must be balanced. Even God in his discipline is balanced. But without discipline also, you are abusing that child. Because what you are doing to the child, you're denying the child the discipline required for his stability. Today we have all sorts of area boys and indolence and insolence and all sorts of issues in our society because one woman and a man did not take time to raise that child. Children are not flowers. They don't grow in the garden and it's automated. Children are formed. And so even from the womb, there are cultures that believe that when a woman is even pregnant, how she surrounds herself, what she's hearing on a daily basis will determine the formation of that child. It is actually even child abuse to terminate a child that did not request to come. So abuse of children is escalating. Is the major factor in our world. In Africa, we are talking about child mutilation. In the West, they are now talking about child mutilation in the name of transgenderism. So there are issues that we are dealing with. But the fundamental factor is that the child is an individual. As much as the child passes through your home, he is not really yours. She's not really yours. Because at the end of the day, she's going to be an executive in an office, a husband or a wife to someone, a manager somewhere, a leader somewhere. And because you fail to give the fundamental training to that child. When I got married, my greatest shock was in raising children. I was actually flabbergasted. I had to call both my in-laws who are older and other people. I said, why didn't people tell us the truth? The real deal is raising children. It's the hardest work on the planet. That's why some women would rather take their handbags and go and sit in an office. Because it's easier than to sit at home and train that naughty one that sometimes every child comes with a tendency. So child abuse is also at that various level. But there is a higher level whereby you extremely begin to beat a child. Maybe you wanted a male, and you ended up with a female. And you look upon that female, especially maybe you'll be having female. So maybe the third female become the wrath of an anger because you're looking for the male child. And so at the end of the day, you start abusing the child and denying that child certain pleasure because you feel that that's not what you wanted. So parents need to recognize that children did not negotiate to come. Children were brought forth. So if there's a priority in a nation, in a family, everywhere is children. For example, if we need to serve food I served the children first. I had a housekeeper who had an issue with it. She said, why am I serving the children? I should serve Oga. I said, Oga don't grow finish. Oga an old man. These are the ones that need to eat food. And she was in shock, because child abuse includes when the father is eating the thigh and the flesh and the legs, and the children are eating the bone that has no meat. It is child abuse, because the protein required for that child's brain development to be the next Nigeria or the next African that will bring change is being denied. And so the development capacity is being shortchanged. So child abuse is so high that United Nations says 1 out of 4 girls and 10% of boys. Nigeria, 20 million out of school, a population of 200 million plus. We're still counting, we're not too sure, are out of school. Has proven that what UNICEF statistics says is a fact. And we are all sitting down pretty, and the child on the streets, the child at home that has not gone to school because we have policies that are not working. So it's so fundamental.
All right. Let me take you back, permit me to take you back to the issue of domestic violence. We've been speaking with men, and now that we have you here, I would like to have your take in that regard. You know, the statistic has it that 1 in 4 women, 1 in 9 women in Nigeria are likely going to be involved in physical abuse with their partner. What do you think is largely responsible for the trends or cases being reported recently about the issue of domestic violence in Nigeria?
Parenting. Institutions like religion, whether it's Islamic religion, Christians, wherever, those two, and thirdly, education. A child who sees his dad consistently abusing his mother and sees the mother also taking it without response. And why does the mother take it without response? Because she has been told it's okay. No, it is not okay. It's absolutely evil under the sun. It's even against God and against humanity. And so upbringing, fundamentally, I've told friends of mine, I've told myself, my children are in their 20s, before they enter anybody's house, speaking Pidgin a little bit here, with permission, I will ensure we investigate. Family content matter. A lot of people are suffering because of family content. I have people who go and report to their in-laws, and the in-laws say, me too, they beat me too, they beat me, and I stayed. Really? They beat you and you stayed, and you now have validated that the fact that child or domestic abuse is okay. There's also the gaslighting, reducing a woman's capacity to bear as minimum. But there's also abuse of husbands. I mean, don't understate that, but it's not as glaring as what the women have gone through. Women have died. I have them. I know the ones that have died. Sinachi, case in point. I have people who had to end up in psychiatric hospital because of domestic violence. Why does domestic violence happen? Because we need to understand its root so that we begin to tackle it properly. And that's why the last time I was speaking, I said we need mental health centers like never before. Let's not call it psychiatric homes. It would be better to code it as mental health. So now when the person is going, he will know that probably he's going to meet a counselor, but it's actually the fact that he has psychosis or she has psychosis. And what is that psychosis? In your mental faculty, you already have a problem of understanding the concept of marriage and the partner you have. Your partner is not your slave. Even the concept of bride price needs to be revisited in its understanding. Because you didn't go purchase a wife. You brought in a woman to help and partner with you in raising a better generation. And like I said the last time, a woman who is not fundamentally focused, emotionally strong, will raise weak children. And weak generation, weak society, weak nations. So parenting is fundamental. I am blessed I have both male and a female. And even when I was raising them, I fundamentally let them know what makes them unique. And there are certain things that is not, it must be female. For example, the philosophy of washing of clothes. My son had to learn to wash a bit before he also learned to use the washing machine, because I have a philosophy of washing machine. I don't believe people spending 3 hours using their hands to do what machines can do. But my son knew how to cook. My daughter knew how to cook. I told my son, cooking is a skill, and never marry a woman for her cooking skill. Marry her for capacity. Marry her for ability. Because cooking is something that can be replaced by cooks if you have money, by housekeepers if you have money. There are certain things that cannot be replaced. And I told them those things. And even as a young boy, he dares not even touch a female in any form, starting with his own sibling, because the girl is the younger one, or people in school. My ear can't hear it. Because I already reminded him that you're on a transition in my home. You're not a permanent resident. And so that fundamental understanding has not been ingrained. Lies have been told a man. A particular guy slapped his wife and the baby dropped on the floor. And today the baby has mental issues. So control, self-control, these are the things we were taught in discipleship. Controlling yourself, understanding your limits, boundaries, they need to be taught. See, life is not automated. Life is created. As long as we as human beings, we need to know it is line upon line, precept upon precept. We need to understand that people need to know incremental change. And every child must be trained. That's why I was telling you about the spare the rod. The spare the rod is simply saying when the child is wrong, discipline the child. Doesn't mean take a stick per se. There are many ways of disciplining the child. And so we need to know that we discipline with love. Remember that also, we discipline with love, not with hate. That's the difference between the abuse. One is with love. After a child does something, why did you discipline the child? The child should know. You are being punished, or you got 2 strokes of cane because XYZ happened. So everything draws back to that home where either, because an abused man also, a man that was also overly punished, abused, will grow up as an oppressor. Because anger will rise up and he will oppress all those that are around him. And the wife will be the first benefit of that oppression. So it is not the wickedness of just individuals, but it's a system that creates them. And if we want a turnaround, we have to go to the root cause of it. Because many people think it's not solvable, it's not doable, but it is. But we need those policies that help people to make those transitions. So if somebody is caught abusing the child, his wife, the only solution is not jail term. The man must go through the detox of a process to understand what it means to be a man as a leader in his home, and also what it means to lead in his home and how to lead. So people need to be trained.
All right, finding solutions to this. 2 things. What role will education play in parenting? For a parent who's perhaps not literate, would that in any way hinder the ability to bring up a child properly? And when children are in a home where there is abuse, what can they do?
Okay, 2 things. The leader of Singapore, the late Lee Kuan Yew, came up with the statistics on education and the outcome of their children in society. It was a shocking, revealing experiment. So he insisted that the men should not marry downward. The men should marry upward, meaning the graduate men and educated men must marry educated women. So they spend time as a society to re-educate their society. The reason for continuous illiteracy, what does that mean? Why do we still have high level of illiteracy as a nation and as a continent? It's still an abuse. And so we need to also know how to double back and understand that education is important. Because that mother who is not really educated, the child will be shortchanged. Not that the child can't develop well. There is a woman who, she wasn't educated, but she insisted that the children's education was fundamental. So she pushed on those children. Today, all her children are doing well. So you also have to have that level of character. But today we have people who are going to the market all day. They go to do slave work all day, and nobody's looking at that child. The neighbor is raising the child is being abused by the neighbor. He becomes a street child, and the street child becomes the area boy, and the area boy becomes something else. Or becomes an orchard child in the north and join a terrorist group because nobody paid attention. So parenting must be trained. If there's anything religious organization, they must have a roadmap for parenting. as much as training institutions for parenting. Parenting is not automated. If we go into school to be a doctor, why shouldn't I be educated and trained to become a parent? Even if I cannot train as in reading and writing, I could be trained in my own language what it takes to bring up a child in the native language. So all that still requires training. And the other issue of
what can a child do?
A child in abuse home needs to cry out to either a leader institution. That's where religious groups also comes in. You know, apart from government, we as a community, there must be community responsibility of one another. That's how it was done of old. The government was not the one doing it. It was community leaders and the religious leader that was taking responsibility for that abused child. So that child is removed out of the home and the parents are retrained, and if it's necessary for them to be brought back, they'll be brought back. But now the states, as it were, in Western world have taken over that responsibility that was meant to be for the religious body to take responsibility. But the child must cry out. No child should be silent in abuse.
All right, let's look at these dimensions to domestic violence. It's also good to balance this discussion.
Yes.
Where you have women beating their husbands now, according to statistics available in Lagos State. In fact, interestingly, they beat them to submission. About 340 cases in the last 1 year.
Especially during the COVID-19.
So what's likely responsible for
mostly the women that succeed in doing that probably are financially empowered to the degree they want to oppress. And they are violent women because also remember now, that woman, if I traced her, now if I'm counseling her and I trace, I will find out that she was abused. And all men to her psychic, all men are terrorists, all men are wicked. So unfortunately, somebody married a woman with that psychological issues and complexes. And so she is lashing out on that male man, that any attempt to try and usurp her, she does it in the double, so that she will make sure you remember forever that she's not one of those women. But it's not necessary. It's also a psychosis. You are having psychological issue of, you know, I always tell people, I said, we're supposed to be married, we have had children together, why are we fighting? It's the most abnormal thing in the planet for me. Then later on, someone will even go back to bed, even after that, after they are beating each other. And I look at these people, I say, you're not normal. So that's not normal, we need to solve it. So that woman too has psychosis. Most likely, I will guarantee you, either thoroughly sexually abused, or turned to a slave in her home, or by an auntie, an uncle, or someone. She is an abused woman. There is no way a normal woman who was brought up in a proper family will ever do that. It's a classic case of abuse. And so she becomes the abuser. And that's why I say, for me, I'm not in a hurry to say they should go to jail if it's not totally excessive of both sexual violence and excessive of domestic violence. People need to be counseled more. That's why I did mediation, because people need to be counseled more than to be cut off. So we have people who are suffering from what they themselves don't even know have become an issue because of the way they were brought up. And it could also be a teacher, it could be words that were said. And when you keep degrading and denigrating, and if you check for a woman, for example, check 2 generations back, they are probably all single mothers. Unfortunately, she married and said, this man, I have to put him under control so that ABC will happen. People quarrel. I mean, I quarrel with my husband. I have issues, especially when things are not done according to the principles. But carry the stick and start beating, it can't happen because I didn't see it happening. I wasn't taught that. And although I had my abuse case, like I said, in the polygamous home, but it was not to the extreme that people were beating me for me to think that I have to beat people. Although I'm a very disciplined person and I'm a disciplinarian first class. However, never to the level of abuse. There's self-control.
All right, you just mentioned the school. The abuser could even be the teacher talking down on children. Maybe you feel the teacher feels the child is not so brilliant, using words like, oh, olodo, meaning like the child is dull. But what are those signs you would see and get to know, or begin to think that perhaps this child has been abused. It could be from the home, it could be from the school. What are the signs an abused child exhibits?
Yeah, I mean, I've been married for over 28 years, so in the early time of my marriage, children gather in my house to do their lessons. Because I have read a lot before I got married, and fundamental in my psychic, all bringing of children was on my table. I was someone that I say, by the time I'm in my 60s, I don't want to hear any issue that I'm running after a child, because I want my space and I want to fulfill my own purpose. But there was this child that was in my house. Of all the children, the quietness and the lack of participation, he doesn't get involved. So I had to sit him aside, separate from everybody, trying to get to know the child. So I called the mom. I said, there's something abnormal about this child. And he said, oh, the teacher in their school, they always call him Olodo because he was a quiet type. Not that he's not intelligent, he doesn't want to respond. He's not responsive, being a quiet one, because children come with what we call the bent. Children come with their own wills, but you need to now shape it right for societal function. And so I told the mom immediately, take that child out of that school now and right now. And that's what she had to do. She had to remove the child from that school. But other ways is to report so that the teacher can be removed, or the teacher has to be retrained. Because sometimes that teacher, and that's why psychology is very important. That teacher could also be suffering from psychosis. She's also an abused woman who now lashes on the children. But somebody has not taken time to examine her. And that's why nothing should be taken by chance. No report. And great countries like Singapore today, all their leaders go through psychometric test. Psychometric test. And so we need to also have psychometric test as a policy for a lot of leaders. I mean, we have political leaders who are abusing people and doing all sorts of things. And so the teacher in the class also has issues. So we shouldn't just meet someone and think everything is okay. The person is the package of the foundation of their parent background, foundation of their education, and the foundation of their religion. And that religion, there could be abuse also in religion. So don't even kid yourself. Abuse can be happening within the church gate and the mosque gate. So we should not deny the fact, because we call it religion, all is well. So everywhere abuse is taking place with a torchlight and a comb and a broom, we need to find out, because people who are not psychologically balanced cannot lead.
All right. For couples who are battling with the issue of domestic violence, maybe even for years, at what point do you consider separation or divorce? And then let's look at the religious angle to it, that divorce is not an option. Then also the welfare of the kids. What should be taken into consideration?
First and foremost, when there is abuse that is excessive, what do we mean by excessive? Mean to the degree of violence that creates harm. There's a fighting. People fought is not necessarily violent, but now this is the man slamming. I have a friend, the husband slammed her on the wall. And at that level, they must separate. There's no story. There's no story. Separation is better than death. All marriages end up on earth. There is no trans-marriage into heaven. In heaven, there's no marriage. So anybody who thinking they are going to be marriage in heaven is kidding themselves. For me, as a Christian, it's clearly written in Scripture. Then secondly, the issue of divorce. Divorce is a really, really complex case whereby it should only be prescribed where all options are off the table. What do I mean by that? Meaning that this abuser refuses to change. He doesn't want to go for counseling. He still wants to have his way. He's a narcissist. He wants to ensure that he continue to do it. When he refuses, normally separation takes a time. When we say separation, it could be 6 months, it could be 1 year. Both parties must be ready to go through counseling and go through psychological evaluation and ensure that they are fit to live together. At that point in time, the child should always stay with a psychologically balanced one. The one who is psychologically balanced. Otherwise, we look for relatives who are balanced, that can take responsibility. And that's where the state comes in. It's not for the state to take the child, because that is not right. The child must still be in the community or family, but the state can support such a family who wants to take responsibility when the two parties are crazy. So, but after we have dealt with you people apart, and we have a sense, no divorce can take place at an immediate junction. For me, divorce must take place maybe after 3 years, 4 years, when all options, and I repeat, all options have been looked at. And even God himself divorced his people at the time. So divorce, he say he hates, but sometimes it's permitted for the sanity of the individual and the security of life. Life is bigger than marriage.
Thank you very much, Reverend Juliet Beniti, certified mediator, trainer, and facilitator of leadership concepts, for talking to us about child abuse in the context of domestic violence. We appreciate your time with us here in the studio.
Once again, thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.